In the twilight of his pontificate, Pope Francis addressed a mystery the world must not forget. It concerned a truth hidden for decades under a veil of silence, a revelation so profound and unsettling that church hierarchs guarded it from public knowledge for over half a century. Why? Because the message's content had the power to shake the very foundations of human existence. Though attempts were made to consign it to oblivion, to bury it under the weight of time, the moment of truth still arrived, and what was hidden could no longer remain in the shadows. Pope Francis himself, in a measured voice full of faith, alluded to it shortly before his passing. It was about the third secret of Fatima, a message given to innocent children but intended for all humanity. If ever there was a question of what the Church so feared, what we were not yet ready to hear, the time has come to learn a truth that could change the world's perception. In a quiet corner of Portugal, in a small town named Fatima, an extraordinary event unfolded in 1917. 3 young shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, were tending their flocks when a vision appeared to them, leaving an indelible mark on their souls. It was May 13th. Under skies filled with divine mystery, a woman dressed in white, shining brighter than the sun, appeared before them. It was the Virgin Mary who brought an important message to humanity. The revelation she shared became, in part, one of the greatest mysteries in the modern church history, the third secret of Fatima. In the subsequent months, the Virgin Mary appeared to them on the 13th of each month, until October of that year. Why were these 3 humble children chosen to convey such a crucial message? Perhaps because simple and pure hearts are most receptive to heavenly truths. From the very first apparition, the messages contained serious warnings about humanity's future. They spoke of suffering, wars, and sins that distance humanity from God, but also offered hope, a call to conversion, and mercy. However, not everything was revealed to the world at that moment. A portion of the message remained secret for many years, shrouded in silence and surrounded by speculation. During the initial apparitions, the Virgin Mary conveyed what are now known as the first and second secrets. In the first, the children witnessed a terrifying vision of hell, souls engulfed in flames, surrounded by demons, enduring unspeakable suffering. This spectacle was so horrific that Francisco and Jacinta dedicated their lives to prayer and sacrifice for the salvation of sinners. Lucia, who lived much longer than her companions, confessed that the screams heard in this vision haunted her throughout her life. The message was clear: sin has eternal consequences, and the world must urgently return to God. The second secret contained a prophecy about future times. The Virgin Mary warned that if humanity did not repent, a war more terrible than the First World War would erupt. Her words found tragic confirmation in the Second World War. Additionally, she requested the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart to prevent the spread of communism, which would cause persecution of Christians and turn many hearts away from the true faith. These 2 secrets already carried immense spiritual weight, but it was the third secret that caused the greatest apprehension, doubt, and controversy. According to testimonies, the third secret was delivered to the Church with the instruction to make it public in 1960. However, when that moment arrived, the Vatican decided not to reveal its contents. The official reason given was that the world was not yet ready to fully comprehend the message. This decision only fueled various theories and conjectures. Some believed the secret spoke of the end of the world, global catastrophes, or even a profound crisis within the church itself. The silence only amplified fears and assumptions. Clergy members, such as Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano and Cardinal Silvio Oddi, hinted that the secret's content was so shocking it could shake the faith of many believers. But what truth was so sensitive that it was kept secret for over 50 years? In this context, Pope Francis, shortly before entrusting himself to the Lord, revisited this topic. In simple terms, he reminded us that the message of Fatima is not just for the past, but for us today. He spoke of a world distanced from God's love, of humanity wounded by indifference, wars, and the loss of the sacred. And in this final appeal, he reminded us that the true miracle of Fatima is the conversion of the heart. Every word of the Virgin Mary continues to resonate with power, calling us to return to the gospel, to pray diligently, and to dedicate our lives to what remains eternal. The secret that remained hidden for so many years is no longer in a sealed envelope. It is before us, in the reality in which we live, awaiting our response. As years pass, more and more people wonder if we are already witnessing the fulfillment of these prophecies before our eyes, and if the Church is finally preparing to reveal the rest of the hidden message. The final apparition took place on October 13th, and this is what occurred. In 1917, an event etched itself into the memories of tens of thousands, known as the Miracle of the Sun. On that rainy day, as over 70,000 witnesses gathered, the sun suddenly began to spin in the sky, illuminating everything with a kaleidoscope of colours and appearing to descend towards the earth. This spectacle astonished both believers and skeptics. Even newspapers of the time, despite their skepticism, were compelled to acknowledge the numerous eyewitness accounts. For many, it became definitive proof of the apparition's authenticity. However, the spiritual depth of this manifestation remained not fully grasped. It was not merely an astonishing miracle, but an urgent call to awakening. The Virgin Mary announced the approach of times of trial, but emphasized that faith and diligent prayer could help overcome the darkness hanging over humanity. Pope Francis has repeatedly reflected on Mary's mercy, urging that the message of Fatima be viewed not as a distant memory, but as a living call to conversion. He saw in these warnings not omens of fear, but signs of God's mercy, urging souls to awaken before it is too late. Today, more than a century later, this call continues to move hearts. The message of Fatima remains relevant, representing a spiritual crossroads where every soul is called to responsibly choose its path. But the mystery of the third secret still stirs minds. Does it contain a direct indication of the calamities of our time? The history of Fatima poses a profound question. Are we ready to face the truth? These revelations were not mere pious tales for the amusement of believers. They were warning signs sent from heaven. The Virgin Mary came not to sow fear, but to offer an opportunity, a moment of grace before the doors close. Time for a response is running out. In this hour, more than ever before, we are called to listen. The first and second secrets of Fatima form the foundation of a message that remains relevant today. Conveyed in 1917 to the three shepherd children, these secrets reveal truths capable of profoundly impacting the consciousness of the modern world. The first secret peeled back the veil between earth and eternity. Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta witnessed a vision of hell, a fiery landscape filled with souls tormented by demonic entities. Lucia later recalled that this vision was forever imprinted on her memory. Jacinta, deeply moved by what she saw, began offering daily sacrifices for sinners, while Francisco, shaken to his core, found solace in prayer. The message was clear. Hell is not a metaphor or a distant theory, but a spiritual reality for those who turn away from God. The Virgin Mary urged them to pray diligently, to offer penance for the lost, and to wear the rosary as a shield against evil. This call was directed not only to the inhabitants of the Portuguese hills, but to the entire world. In an era when faith was waning and spiritual apathy was spreading, humanity was increasingly drifting away from the heart of God. The second secret foretold global turmoil. The Virgin Mary warned that if the world did not repent and return to God, another war, far more terrible than the First World War, would erupt. This indeed came to pass. In 1939, the world was plunged into World War II, but the message did not end there. Mary spoke of Russia, a nation destined to give rise to an ideology that denies God and seeks to extinguish the flame of faith. She requested the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart, warning that otherwise communism would spread, harming morality, religious freedom, and the dignity of the soul. History confirmed this warning. Communism spread to many countries, suppressing the church in numerous regions. The 20th century witnessed the rise of regimes that sought to silence the voice of God through violence and persecution. Within the church, debates arose as to whether the consecration had been carried out in accordance with the Virgin Mary's request. Pope Pius XIII performed an act of consecration in 1942, but some believed it did not fully comply with Mary's instructions, as there was no unified action by bishops worldwide. It was only in 1984 that Pope John Paul II, amidst intense international tensions, performed a solemn act of worldwide consecration. Shortly thereafter, the Soviet system began to crumble, culminating in the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The gravity of these first two secrets cannot be ignored. Heaven spoke, but humanity largely refused to listen. Many dismissed the visions as legends or myths, but history does not lie. These innocent children, without formal education, predicted events that defied all human understanding. Is it possible to explain such foresight without acknowledging divine intervention? Despite potential political interpretations, the profound essence of these revelations is primarily spiritual. Mary appeared not to teach geopolitical lessons, but to call for universal reconciliation. She pointed to prayer, especially the recitation of the Rosary, devotion to her Immaculate Heart, and penance as paths to avoid the abyss and draw closer to mercy. The core of Fatima's message is not fear, but hope. The salvation of souls depends not on predestination, but on each individual's personal choice. This appeal is directed to every person to live consciously, act with love, and pray with unwavering faith. And although the third part of the secret still remains a mystery, the question becomes ever more pertinent. Are we ready for when the full truth is revealed? When the Vatican decided not to publish the full content of the third secret of Fatima in 1960, it not only sparked a legitimate question, but also a wave of speculation that has yet to subside. In whispered conversations and anxious discussions, many wondered what could be so terrifying that it needed to be hidden from the faithful. Some believed the Vatican feared panic, while others suspected the core issue was far deeper, a spiritual tempest shaking the very foundations of the Church. The ambiguous and contradictory responses from church hierarchs only intensified the atmosphere of mystery. Yet, amidst all these doubts, the call to prayer and penance continued to shine, like a bright beacon in the dark night. Pope Francis has frequently reflected on the nature of secrets within the Church. For him, these are not mere puzzles to be solved, but events that deeply touch the soul with a gravity transcending any single era. The mystery of Fatima, in his view, is not only a prophecy, but also a mirror reflecting the state of the human heart. It speaks to the necessity of silence, not as a refuge from fear, but as a sacred space where true discernment finds its voice. Decades ago, Sister Lucia, one of the visionaries, put her experiences to paper, obeying an order, her heart filled with horror at what she had seen. This document was delivered to the Vatican with clear instructions. It was to be made public in 1960. But when that year arrived, silence persisted. Public bewilderment was widespread. Why conceal something that purportedly came from heaven? Could any message be more terrifying than the wars, persecutions, and bloodshed of the 20th century? Finally, in 2000, during the pontificate of John Paul II, the Vatican published a version of the secret describing a vision: a bishop in white robes walking among ruins and falling under fire from soldiers. Many interpreted this image as an allusion to the 1981 assassination attempt on the Pope, which, in his belief, the Virgin Mary prevented. In gratitude, he consecrated the world to Mary's Immaculate Heart. Nevertheless, anxiety did not subside. The vision seemed incomplete, containing symbols that caused alarm but received no explanation. Theologians and priests wondered, was everything revealed? Among them were those who, like the late Malachi Martin, asserted that something more remained, a warning of spiritual collapse originating in the highest echelons of the Church. Others hypothesized that the secret spoke of a world losing its sense of truth, consumed by relativism, where the flame of true faith flickers in the winds of time. Lucia herself, in her later writings, hinted that the most serious threat was not war or catastrophe, but sin, the souls turning away from God. For her, the true battle of Fatima was spiritual. It was not a conflict between nations, but a struggle within the human heart. The Virgin Mary came not to sow fear, but to call for faithfulness. She requested the recitation of the Rosary, sacrifices, and a life dedicated to grace. Without true conversion, she warned, the world would reap the bitter fruits of its decisions. Pope Francis, whose devotion to the Virgin Mary has been evident at every step of his pontificate, has repeatedly echoed these calls. He often spoke of the danger of a church mired in worldliness, of empty rituals, of a faith that has forgotten its fire. In 2017, on the centenary of the Fatima apparitions, he entrusted himself to Mary's hands, committing his pontificate to her protection. He did this not as one vested with authority, but as a pilgrim seeking light in the darkness. For those who closely follow the signs of the times, his words resonate as confirmation. But the question remains open. Was the entire truth revealed in 2000? Or is there still something hidden in the Roman archives, awaiting its hour? Some assert that the Church is awaiting the opportune moment to shield the faithful from upheaval. Others believe the secret has already been revealed, and we are living in the time of its fulfillment. One thing is clear: the third secret is not merely a document stored in the Vatican archives. It is a spiritual call. The Virgin Mary came not to instill fear, but to invite. Her message, like the Gospel, stems not from condemnation, but from mercy. She asks us to make a choice, to awaken from indifference, to step out of our comfort zones, and to return to the heart of Christ. The question of new revelations remains open, but perhaps more important is the readiness of human hearts to receive the heavenly instructions already resounding. Pope Francis has steadfastly prepared the ground for a revelation long hidden within the heart of the Church. Throughout his pontificate, he has emphasized an idea permeating all his actions. The silence of indifference must cease. A world engulfed in crisis cannot coexist with lukewarm faith. In this context, Francis, a descendant of a railway worker and migrant, has spoken with remarkable clarity about the destructive consequences of materialism, the chilling spread of global apathy, and the erosion of Christian values in a society seduced by secularism. He boldly pointed to spiritual erosion, stemming not from outside, but from within the Church, as a decisive trial. The faith of many is shaken not in distant lands, but within the very walls of the sanctuary. For some, these warnings echo the mystery that has troubled generations, the third secret of Fatima. Scholars and the faithful have long connected the idea of a great apostasy, an internal decline of faith, including among the clergy, with the vision revealed to the shepherds in Portugal. According to this interpretation, the danger lies not only in unbelief, but also in deception, misguided leaders, truth disguised as convenience, and the gospel experienced merely formally, without true fervor. Repeatedly, Pope Francis's words have approached the verge of prophecy. In one homily, he spoke of the growing desire of the evil one to separate shepherds from their flocks. In another, he warned against a Christianity emptied of Christ, where tradition survives without transformation, and ritual is preserved without a true relationship with the Lord. These reflections have deeply affected those who consider the apparitions of the Virgin Mary a divine call to vigilance of hearts. Many believe that the calamities she predicted are increasingly manifest in the contemporary life of the Church. The images of a pope suffering alongside bishops and laity, facing persecution or even death, no longer seem distant or symbolic, but are felt as a premonition of something already present among us. Nevertheless, some claim that the essence of the message has not yet been fully revealed. The official publication of 2000, in their view, might not have contained the whole truth. Whispers suggest that a final part remains, perhaps withheld out of prudence or fear. In this uncertainty, many eyes are turned to Francis. Will he be the chosen one to reveal the entire truth? Some voices within the Vatican have hinted at this cautiously. Even Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, who was directly involved in the 2000 publication, has been noted for allegedly concealing essential details. Rumors of a second part of the secret do not subside. On the contrary, they intensify as the world convulses under the burden of its own crises. The present time can hardly be called peaceful. There are many signs: unending wars, unstable economies, an earth suffering from ecological collapse, and new diseases testing human resilience. For those faithful to the message of Fatima, none of this is coincidental. These are warnings. The Virgin Mary foretold that if there is no conversion, suffering would befall humanity. Francis, like a watchman on a wall, calls for prayer, penance, and a return of the heart to God. He repeatedly emphasizes that true peace is born from reconciliation, not from political maneuvers, from surrendering the soul to God, not from governmental decisions. The Rosary, consecration to the Immaculate Heart, a life of penance. These are not relics of the past, but remedies for the present. However, within the Church itself, internal wounds deepen, scandals eroding trust, widening doctrinal disagreements, and political tensions causing confusion. Some accuse Francis of being overly liberal, while others criticize him for insufficient resolve. This ebb and flow reflects a deeper struggle, a spiritual purification, perhaps foretold long ago. Some believe the Church is now traversing a valley of its own purification. And amidst all this, Francis remains a shepherd whose gaze is fixed not on victory, but on fidelity. He speaks not to instill fear, but to awaken hope. The Mother of Christ came not to frighten her children, but to offer them refuge. Through every Marian pilgrimage and every Hail Mary recited, the Pope emphasizes that prayer is the Church's strength, especially the Rosary, simple and repetitive, yet possessing the power to change the course of history. Perhaps a moment will come when he speaks more candidly about the secret, but perhaps what we await is not a document, but a decision, to live as if we already know everything. The silence surrounding the third secret may not be an omission, but an invitation to prepare the soul, to awaken from lethargy, to believe that God does not hide the truth, but grants time for return. Ultimately, the most important secret lies not in future revelations, but in the decision that must mature in every heart. The message has already been sounded. The call to conversion, unceasing prayer, and unwavering faith in divine providence remains the cornerstone. In anticipation of a possible grand revelation, the question is not about our readiness to receive it, but whether we have responded to the call that echoed from Mary's lips over a century ago. Reflecting on this, one cannot help but recall the profound spiritual concern so often expressed by Pope Francis, who sees himself not merely as a doctrinal instructor, but as a pilgrim walking hand in hand with humanity in these prophetic times. His unspoken yet firm presence resonates with the spiritual tension that links the Fatima revelations to the destiny of the entire world. And it is in the depth of this silence that the faith proclaimed by Francis shines with particular brilliance. The warning voiced by the Virgin Mary continues to resonate with an urgent yet tender intonation. Since the Fatima apparitions in 1917, her voice has transcended the boundaries of time, not confined to the past century, but projecting into the future with ever-increasing force. Endless wars, natural disasters, global epidemics, persecution of those who steadfastly hold to their faith, all these appear as signs, like candles lit amidst the raging storm of spiritual turmoil that has gripped the world. But what exactly did Mary ask of us? Why do her words so profoundly trouble the conscience of modernity? At the heart of her message lies a painful truth. The human heart has distanced itself from its Creator. In this estrangement, the soul remains exposed, wounded by sin, weakened by indifference. The apparitions clearly indicated the necessity of a profound conversion of heart, a return to the rhythm of prayer and redemptive penance. Without these practices, she warned, sin would spread like a plague, affecting not only individuals, but also the structures of societies and governments. The Virgin Mary foresaw times when faith would be obscured not only by external persecutions, but also by an internal erosion of moral clarity and Christian values. The moral decay we witness today and the growing secularization clearly reflect the warnings sounded long ago. The loss we face is not only doctrinal, but profoundly human. Mary's words were unambiguous. She pointed to a danger stemming not only from outside the church, but also emerging from within, a spiritual crisis that would reach the highest echelons of its leadership. Many theologians have reflected on the so-called third secret of Fatima, partially revealed in 2000, suggesting it refers precisely to this internal trial, a spiritual martyrdom more tormenting than the sword. The image of a pope surrounded by martyrs ascending a desolate hill may symbolize not only bloody persecutions, but also the desolation of faith caused by indifference and betrayal. It is not merely about geopolitical realities or external threats to the institution of the Church, but a struggle for the very soul of faith, where relativism, apathy, and the rejection of a gospel-centered life threaten to dissolve the sacred. Mary's warnings are not confined to the Church's walls. They extend to nations and peoples, foretelling wars and catastrophes not as punishments, but as consequences, the natural fruits of a world that has rejected God's loving authority. The past century witnessed these consequences in heartbreaking form: world wars, the rise of tyrants, and bloodshed in silence by countless persecuted Christians. Yet, Mary came not to proclaim condemnation, but to illuminate a path back. She promised that through the daily recitation of the Rosary and sincere consecration to her Immaculate Heart, the course of suffering could be altered. This consecration is not a gesture dictated by fear, but an act of trust, a way to entrust one's entire life into the hands of divine mercy. Her call has resonated in other recognized apparitions, such as those in Akita and Medjugorje, reminding us that this invitation is not isolated, but an incessant whisper from heaven. The Rosary, so often underestimated as mere repetition, is in fact a chain of grace, uniting hearts, strengthening families, and protecting nations. In Mary's voice, there is no terror, only the urgent tenderness of a mother calling her children to take refuge from danger. Her warning does not seek to paralyze, but to awaken, for the world's destiny depends not only on governmental decisions or economic crises, but on the silent choice made by each soul in the depths of its heart. When humanity closes its heart to God, it opens the doors to confusion and chaos. But even amidst the darkness, those who seek God with humility find a peace that the world cannot take away. Pope Francis tirelessly emphasizes that this peace is not passive, but active. He emerges from a church that reaches out, not one confined to its own comfort, but embracing the wounded, the forgotten, and the suffering. His vision of a living gospel, embodied in acts of mercy and solidarity, reflects the same call to authenticity that Mary addressed to us. For conversion, in his view, is not an abstract concept, but something real, visible, and concrete. The hungry fed, the outcast welcomed, a system of injustice questioned in the name of Christ. And without prayer, as Francis often reiterates, we lack the strength to confront the challenges of our time. Today, a question arises in many minds. Have we reached the threshold beyond which the prophesied events begin? Will future generations witness the unfolding of the message delivered at Fatima? Undoubtedly, the signs surrounding us are unsettling, yet the foundation remains unshaken. Evil, no matter how loudly it proclaims itself, cannot break the steadfastness of faith manifested in silence. Mary's apparition was not to close a door on us, but to show us the path back. Through repentance, prayer, and acts of love, the world can still change. However, This transformation depends entirely on our response, on the response of each one of us. The call from Fatima has not lost its relevance today and rings as clearly as it did in distant 1917. Mary urges us to cast off the veil, to see the world not only in its apparent guise, but to grasp its true essence. She points to a field of spiritual battle, to a vineyard awaiting its laborers, to a place where light can still pierce through the gloom. These signs should not be ignored, nor should we fall into despair. The decision must be made without delay. The moment has come. Even as the world trembles, God's mercy continues to pour forth. Mary asks little of us, hearts filled with trust, hands ready for tireless work, and lives dedicated to love. It is in this response that the only light capable of dispelling the gathering shadows resides. And if the Church is destined to pass through trials, may they find us not asleep, but in prayerful vigil. In the concluding part of his reflections, Pope Francis shared his profound concern, expressed not as a warning from on high, but as a painful truth born from years spent alongside those bearing spiritual wounds. He spoke not with anxiety, but with the gravity of a shepherd intimately familiar with the weight of silence within the Church. In his view, the ethical confusion rampant today and the loss of reverence for the sacraments are not isolated phenomena, but visible signs of a deeper schism. Silent apostasy, as Francis noted, originates not from without, but from within, when those who have embraced the gospel begin to adapt it to the shifting currents of culture. Francis repeatedly pointed to this temptation to present a faith devoid of the cross, reduced to a mere cultural formality. The symbolism embedded in the third secret of Fatima manifests with terrifying force in the contemporary setting. The bishop, in white, long perceived as representing the Pope, advances through the ruins of a destroyed city, stepping over the bodies of priests and faithful who have fallen victim to neglect and violence. While some connect this vision to the assassination attempt on John Paul II, others argue it extends far beyond a single event, representing an ongoing spiritual martyrdom, a slow and agonizing purification of the Church, where faith is severely tested. This is not a figment of imagination. Mystics like Padre Pio and Maria Valtorta predicted that the Church would be wounded not only by external attacks, but also by betrayals from within. From Akita to Fatima, the apparitions of the Virgin Mary formed a chain of urgent heavenly calls. In Akita, her words were stark. Bishops would rise against bishops. Cardinals would oppose each other. The Church is persecuted, but also torn by internal strife. This continuity through time appears to many not as a coincidence, but as a prophetic line, foretelling a necessary trial preceding the promised victory. Amidst these trials, Pope Francis called not for panic, but for discernment. The true danger lies not in fire falling from the heavens, but in the passive acceptance of a form of Christianity devoid of sacrifice, in an empty spiritual life reduced to mere appearance. And yet, even amidst the chaos, there remains room for hope. Amidst the cries of division, some believe Francis has stood as a defender, confronting forces seeking to divide the faith, while others accuse him of fostering ambiguity. Few would deny that his pontificate has been marked by internal struggles, reflecting a larger crisis foretold earlier. The great trial is not confined within the Church's walls. In many parts of the world, Christians are imprisoned, tortured, and killed for their faith. In Western countries, religion has been relegated to the background, giving way to ideologies that offer comfort devoid of truth and freedom unsanctified by holiness. Secularism is rapidly advancing, manifesting not only as indifference, but as an active force opposing the soul's yearning for the eternal. This too is part of the spiritual battle Mary spoke of, a battle for human hearts. And yet, amidst the gathering shadows, the light of Fatima continues to burn. Mary's voice calls out not in despair, but with unwavering love. Do not be afraid. Her call to prayer, especially the recitation of the Rosary, remains a shield protecting against the encroaching darkness. The promise holds true. Through faith and perseverance, her immaculate heart will triumph. This is not an end, but the beginning of a profound renewal born in fire and tears. In this hour, we are offered a choice. Are we ready for the impending trials? Do we recognize in the global unrest the signs prophesied long ago? Wars are multiplying. Natural disasters are becoming more frequent and destructive, eroding our certainty and raising questions few dare to ask. Is this the world Mary warned us of if we do not return to God? The signs seem too clear to ignore. She warned that if humanity persisted in its pride, the very earth would groan in pain. And so it is happening. Natural disasters, such as earthquakes, hurricanes and floods, appear not merely as natural catastrophes, but as manifestations of a deep malaise, reflecting the suffering of creation caused by humanity's turning away from its Creator. In the Akita Revelations, Mary's harsh words foretold a rain of fire from heaven and the death of many lives. Regardless of whether these images are to be understood literally or symbolically, they awaken in the soul a sense of urgency and gravity. Spiritual torments are not limited to the natural realm alone. They also manifest in despotic governments, divisive ideologies, and fragmented societies, where even within a single family, a common language of moral values has been lost. The battle predicted by Mary unfolds not only in the external world, but also within each person, in their consciousness. The modern world, caught in a frantic race, moves further and further away from divine truth. Relativism, proclaiming the relativity of all values, has become the dominant philosophy, leading human hearts away from their spiritual foundation. While pandemics and hunger continue to sow suffering, the cries of the destitute grow louder. Amidst the general chaos, Mary's words continue to resonate, addressing each person not with a thunderous roar, but with the quiet, persistent whisper of a mother who will never abandon her children. In his later years, Pope Francis often reflected on the quiet sorrow that enveloped the world like a thick fog. In recent global crises, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, he saw not only a reminder of human fragility, but also a painful exposure of the selfishness and indifference rooted in society. These events were not merely health emergencies, but spiritual awakenings, opening eyes to how far humanity had strayed from its Creator. Reflecting on these trials, Francis constantly returned to Mary's prophetic voice, whose words, spoken at Fatima, ring like a bell piercing through time, warning of consequences if hearts do not turn to God. Many faithful wonder if the current sufferings are precursors to the punishments mentioned in the Marian apparitions. Mary warned that if the world did not repent, calamities would befall it. Her warnings were not threats, but sincere pleas from a mother striving for the holiness of her children. One of the most striking aspects of her message was the prophecy of coming persecutions. This is no longer a distant history of ancient martyrs, but a harsh reality of today. In many countries, men, women, and children are imprisoned, tortured, and killed simply for professing their faith in Christ. In Western countries, these persecutions take different forms: restrictive laws, cultural shifts, growing hostility towards religion, but their destructive impact remains unchanged. The gradual erosion of religious freedom and the marginalization of Christian values undermine the Church from within. This silent apostasy, predicted by Mary, will be one of the most serious trials for the Church in its darkest times. However, even in this shadow, hope does not fade. In 1917, in a world wounded by sin and pain, the message of Fatima was not only an alarm, but also a promise of mercy. The promise was clear and profound. If humanity returned to God through prayer, penance, and sincere consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the destructive march of evil could be stopped. Among the gifts Mary offered her children, the rosary holds a special place, not just beads on a string, but a shield against despair, a rhythm of peace amidst chaos. Countless testimonies of transformed lives, averted tragedies, and received blessings confirm the power of this prayer. Mary assured that her heart would triumph. This promise, passed down through generations, remains a beacon for those wandering in darkness. However, some still question whether what is happening today is the full fulfillment of those prophecies or merely the beginning of something greater. The Church, full of wisdom, calls not for despair, but for discernment. Pope Francis repeatedly emphasized the need for a mature faith, based not on fear, but on trust. He urged the faithful to remain vigilant, steadfast in prayer, and not to succumb to panic. Mary's apparitions are not meant to frighten, but to awaken, to call for spiritual sobriety, to turn our gaze from the fleeting to the eternal. The signs of the times are evident. They appear in news headlines, in enacted laws, in the loss of moral compass. But Mary did not abandon humanity to its fate. She showed the way: conversion, prayer, mercy. In a world gripped by uncertainty, believers are called to be unquenchable lamps, living witnesses to God's presence. Fatima is not a story of fatalism, but a call to renewal, prompting inner transformation. If humanity accepts this call with courage and devotion, it will be able to witness a glorious triumph of grace and peace that no human force can establish. The Rosary and the consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary are not merely echoes of days gone by, but spiritual guides relevant for the present generation and those to come. Mary's call, sounded in 1917, is still urgent today. Her request for daily prayer and the consecration of our homes and hearts to her is as significant as it was a century ago. Consecrating oneself to Mary is not a formal repetition of memorized phrases, but a complete entrustment of one's life to her maternal care. It is a conscious decision to live under her protection, constantly striving towards Christ. The victory of Mary's heart is imminent, she promised it. However, this triumph requires our consent, our participation, our sincere desire for transformation. Throughout the centuries, holy men and women have testified to the gracious fruits of this devotion, the value it instills, the grace it multiplies, and the power of the Rosary. The Rosary is not just a religious practice. It is a profound contemplation that immerses us in the life of Christ, in the mysteries that give meaning to our own existence. Each bead is a step on the path to healing the soul. Each decade is a bridge connecting pain and hope. And, as history attests, from quiet monastic cloisters to roaring battlefields, This simple prayer has worked miracles beyond all rational explanation. In the hour of greatest need, it remains what it has always been, a refuge, a compass, a light in the darkness of the storm. The power of the Rosary lies not in its complexity, but in its disarming simplicity, opening the soul to mystery and allowing everyone, regardless of their background or social status, to enter into the divine presence. In his quiet reflections, Pope Francis repeatedly returned to this unchanging truth. The simplest prayer can become a ladder leading to heaven. With this conviction, as if with an unquenchable fire, he concluded his earthly journey. Francis understood that the course of history seemed to confirm the warnings sounded at Fatima, where Mary cautioned about the impending danger that would loom over the world if the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart was delayed. Her words foretold wars, persecutions, and the spread of errors that would engulf entire nations like wildfire. Throughout the 20th century, these prophetic omens materialized in tragic events: the rise of communism, the suppression of faith in many parts of the globe, the ruthless domination of totalitarian ideologies. In those years, various pontiffs performed acts of consecration, yet many continued to doubt whether the heavenly request had truly been fulfilled. And then, in 1984, John Paul II performed a consecration that many consider decisive. Soon after, walls crumbled. The Iron Curtain fell, the Berlin Wall was destroyed, and the Cold War came to an end. For those capable of discerning divine signs, this was no mere coincidence, but the fruit of prayer, an echo of a consecration that changed the course of history. Mary's message still resonates as clearly today as it did before. She taught that peace is born not from political agreements or military might, but from renewed hearts. The true cause of war, she said, is sin. And so the remedy is not agreements, but conversion to God. The Rosary, in this context, ceases to be a monotonous repetition of words and transforms into a weapon of light. In an era when moral foundations are crumbling under the weight of relativism and materialism, when countless souls feel emptiness and meaninglessness, this ancient prayer shines anew, bringing the lost back to God, offering them not simple solutions, but a peace that comes through self-surrender. Consecration to the Immaculate Heart is not merely a symbol, it is an act of trust, a decision to cast aside worldly illusions and grasp divine mercy. In his liturgies and messages, Pope Francis often returned to this theme, not with fanfare, but with the persistence of a shepherd who knows the way home. He called the Rosary the prayer of the simple, the forgotten, those who have little but give everything. And in this spiritual poverty lies immense power. It is no wonder that he viewed the messages of Fatima not as distant relics of the past, but as a living guide for the contemporary church. Recall the three shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. In their innocence, they grasped what many adults still reject. Prayer and sacrifice are not burdens, but paths leading us to grace. They responded with complete self-giving to Mary's call, offering their sufferings and penances for the healing of the world. Their testimony is not only a relic of the past, it is a mirror in which we must see ourselves today. Even the most insignificant gifts, when united with God, acquire eternal value. The voice of Fatima is not an echo of days gone by, but a living call, resounding in the present. The fate of humanity is decided in the silence of our souls, in the whispered prayers of Hail Marys, in the internal battles that no one sees. This is not superstition, but a spiritual reality. The rosary and the act of consecration are not empty gestures, but living covenants that connect us to the divine plan. In these turbulent times, when fear spreads and truth is questioned, they remain our refuge. Mary's heart will triumph, she said. But the question remains, will we be participants in this triumph? The messages of Fatima are not only warnings, but urgent sacred invitations. Since the first apparition in 1917, the beautiful lady, clothed in radiance, pointed to a danger more terrifying than bombs and hunger, the loss of faith, the spiritual destruction that occurs when souls turn away from God. Mary came not to instill fear, but to awaken consciousness. Her voice was gentle, yet firm. She calls the world not to adhere to rules, but to establish a living relationship with God. And yet, a persistent question echoes: who is listening? In the modern world, gripped by feverish haste, humanity is losing its connection to eternity. The pursuit of comfort leads to hardened hearts, and spirituality is relegated to a secondary role as people build their lives on shaky foundations. This is precisely why Mary's words penetrate through this noise, answering the deepest need of the human soul, offering not success, but salvation. An invisible battle for human souls is underway, and at Fatima, Mary revealed the scope of this confrontation. She spoke of sin not as an outdated concept, but as the deepest wound afflicting the world, warning of moral decay and a society that mistakenly accepts evil as freedom. Unfortunately, these warnings have come true, but Mary's voice has not been silenced. She continues to point the way through prayer, penance, and a return to spiritual values. The awakening of the spirit requires courage. It is not an automatic process, but a conscious choice that must be reaffirmed daily. This choice concerns not only those who have strayed, but also the church itself. Apostasy, expressed as a silent betrayal of faith from within, is one of the most serious threats Mary warned about. The call to conversion is addressed not only to the lost, but to every believer, catechist, and priest. In this fateful hour, heaven calls not for comfort, but for clarity, courage, and holiness. Many believers merely skim the surface of their faith, content with external rituals that do not touch the depths of the soul. Pope Francis anxiously condemned this spiritual lukewarmness, seeing it as a serious threat to the Church's vitality. He understood that the message of Fatima was not merely a historical reference, but a timely invitation to a deeper communion with God. Francis firmly believed that prayer without transformation is but a pale shadow of true faith, and that the gospel should be lived with passion, not formality. The spiritual battle, spoken of in many Marian apparitions, is unfolding openly. In an era where it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish good from evil, moral confusion envelops nations like a fog. Ideologies contrary to the spirit of the gospel are no longer hidden, but dominate, giving rise to a new wave of hostility towards faith that pressures Christian communities. In this atmosphere of uncertainty, people's hearts are anxious. Many seek answers in systems and philosophies that promise instant comfort, but leave the soul empty. However, the voice of the Virgin Mary continues to resonate, calm yet firm, indicating that the path lies not through human structures, but through communion with God. Only God can restore order to our lives and bring back the balance the world so desperately needs. And this restoration begins with the conversion of each person. For every soul that turns to the light becomes a beacon for others. Mary's request was simple yet profound: to pray the rosary daily. This practice is not only a defense but also an intercession, a cry for peace from a heart open to God. The rosary is not merely a set of words, but a slow pilgrimage through the mysteries of salvation, a contemplation of the life of Christ and his mother, transforming the heart. Through the rosary, the world not only stands before God, but begins to change. However, prayer is only part of the call. Mary also asked for sacrifice, a word often misunderstood today. In the modern world, sacrifice is associated with loss or pain to be avoided. However, Mary reveals another reality. Sacrifice born of love possesses redemptive power, uniting pain with Christ's suffering and allowing participation in his saving work. This sacrifice can take various forms: renouncing selfishness, easing another's burden, patiently enduring pain, or battling sin within oneself. Fatima offers not merely a warning but a bright hope. Mary speaks not of a distant or abstract victory, but of one already unfolding when hearts turn to God. We are called to be part of this triumph, to carry it into our lives, our work, our struggles. In every act of self-giving, in every faithful deed, the triumph of her Immaculate Heart begins. The awakening of faith is not a secondary choice, but the key to renewing the world. The call is urgent. Pope Francis, in the last days of his life, often spoke of the need to awaken the Church's mission, urging the faithful to leave comfortable habits and bring hope to the streets, to the peripheries, to those who have forgotten how to hope. This mission echoes the call of Fatima. Mary asks us to live the gospel without fear or shame, even when facing opposition and rejection. The battle is real, but so is the promise. We stand at a decisive turning point in humanity's spiritual history. The words of Fatima are not a distant echo, but a living breath that still ignites the embers of faith in those willing to listen. Each of us is called not to be a spectator, but to rise, shake off the inertia of habit, abandon the paralysis of a sleeping soul, and live fully in God once more. The time has come, the choice is ours. In these sorrowful days of universal silence and prayerful reflection, hearts around the world turn to the memory of Pope Francis. He was not merely a pontiff, but a humble shepherd who dedicated his life to service, compassion, and faith in a better future. His voice, devoid of grandiosity, possessed the gentleness and persistence of a mountain stream, carving its path through stone over centuries. In every homily, in every act of mercy shown to the destitute, in every visit to the most remote corners of the planet, he consistently reminded us that the Church is not an impregnable fortress, but a field hospital open to those who are broken, doubting, and weary of life's burdens. And now, that voice has fallen silent, not from defeat, but from the fullness of what was accomplished. Francis firmly believed that to die serving love means to enter life in its fullness, as he often said. Let us remember him not only as the Bishop of Rome, but as a caring father, ready to share a meal with everyone, whether a believer or a seeker of truth. He bravely led the Church into the streets, where the cry of pain is heard, and where Christ continues to suffer every day. He shared the burdens of refugees, washed the feet of prisoners, grieved with victims of war, and never tired of proclaiming God's boundless mercy. His pontificate was not based on the pursuit of honors and power, but on following the Beatitudes, meekness, peacemaking, and purity of heart. he taught us to see the face of Christ in every person, especially in those whom society has forgotten. Today, as the bells of St. Peter's Basilica toll mournfully and clouds of incense rise to the heavens, we who remain are called to continue the work to which he was so devoted. He said, "Life flourishes when it is given to others and withers in isolation and comfort." He lived in accordance with these words, giving himself completely, asking for nothing in return. His legacy is etched not in stone, but in the souls he touched, in the minds he enlightened, and in the hearts he softened. We, the church he so loved, now carry the torch he held high. Let us pray with a reverence that will be passed down from generation to generation. Lord, source of all compassion, receive your servant Francis into the abode of joy he so eagerly sought. Crown his poverty with heavenly riches. Illumine him with the light he strove to reflect in our world, full of darkness. May angels guide him to paradise, where saints will greet him with open arms, and the Blessed Mother whisper to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Let us pray not only for his soul, but for ourselves, that we may be worthy of the example he left us. May we also walk hand in hand with the outcasts. May we also speak truth with love. May we also proclaim Christ not only in words, but also through our deeds. May, in his memory, our disagreements give way to dialogue, our fear to courage, and our indifference to active compassion. This is a time not only for sorrow, but also for gratitude, witness, and service. Light a candle in your home. Gather together to honor his memory. Recite the rosary in his honor. Attend Mass and offer prayers for the repose of his soul. And most importantly, live in accordance with what he preached. May his passing not be the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a new era. An era of light, clarity, and active service. Grant him eternal rest, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen.